The streets are flooding, and it's coming in fast and furious.
Fast and furious. Good evening. We begin at 5 with Hurricane Ian slamming Florida after making landfall as a Category 4 storm, just shy of a 5. And according to the governor, one of the strongest storms to ever hit the state. Ian's torrential winds and rain have already knocked out power to more than 1 million people. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm David Molko. The hurricane's eyewall came on shore just west of Fort Myers, and it appears it has already caused widespread devastation. Let's give you a look at the storm's location right now as Ian tracks across Florida, cities and counties issuing curfews to keep everyone except first responders off the streets. And it's easy to see why from this video that's coming in. Streets and houses are underwater, trees uprooted, roofs collapsed. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said some places saw a storm surge as high as 12 feet. DeSantis talking to the White House, where the president approved a request for an emergency declaration before Ian hit.
I made it clear to the governor and the mayors that the federal government is ready to help in every single way possible.
And the president has directed federal agencies to surge resources to the Sunshine State. Hundreds of FEMA workers are already on the ground there, along with 5,000 National Guard troops, even more on standby and ready to go. Well, let's bring in Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino. Matt, this is a big storm with folks talking about catastrophic damage. What is the latest?
No, we don't throw those words around lightly either, David. Words like catastrophic and highly destructive, because this is a really serious situation. You mentioned that storm surge of 12 feet. The storm surge warnings extend halfway across the Florida peninsula. That's how far inland the flooding will go. Now, it won't be 12 feet halfway in, but even a couple of feet of water can do amazing damage to homes and structures and the like. Now, here's high-resolution imagery right into the eye of Ian about an hour or so before it made landfall. And here's Sanibel Island. This is Cape Coral, Boca Grande, and the whole Fort Myers area down through here in Naples, right on the edge. So it was still offshore here, but the circulation around this just pushing all that water into areas east and south of the eye of the storm. Ironically, or not ironically, but Tampa Bay, which remained on the north side of the storm here, all the water got pulled out. It actually emptied out the bay largely because of the offshore winds on the northern edge of the storm. But the rain is moving inland right now. Even as the winds are weakening, it's still a force to be reckoned with, a big one. And the rain band's now extending up to the coast of Georgia off on the Atlantic side. So the latest readings, the winds are down to 115 miles an hour, so that's an improvement. But it's still Category 3 right over the heart of Florida. It's not often you see a Category 3 inland, but in Florida, they can do that. It's a lot of water inland, too, so it doesn't weaken as much. Still a Category 1 later on tonight. That's at 11 o'clock our time. And then finally, still a Category 1 just north of the Kennedy Space Center as it emerges into the Atlantic. By the way, it has already delayed, and NASA made the decision days ago to delay the launch of the Artemis rocket because of the approaching hurricane. So they're keeping things battened down at Cape Canaveral there. Then look, a second landfall up around Savannah, Georgia, not as a Category 4, but as a tropical storm. Nonetheless, it's going to cause tremendous flooding on up through the Carolinas and Georgia. It's still a tropical storm on Saturday as it rolls into the mountains of western North Carolina. How about that? That's basically just a testimony to the breadth, the size, and the strength of this storm. It really is a force. Okay, here's what we call the spaghetti charts. Each line represents a different computer model solution as to where the storm will go, most of them focusing on that Savannah, southern South Carolina area. But look what happens later in time. They kind of go all over the place, as the models will do, some of them taking it back offshore, one up the East Coast. So interesting to see that going on there. And then finally, the rainfall totals, which are typically way under forecast by the computer models with tropical systems, forecasting 6 inches here up into the Carolinas. It'll likely be double that amount. David?
Yeah, Florida here, just the beginning. Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Mike Benner now to talk about what's going to be likely a very long recovery. Mike, there is already help from Oregon on the way to Florida right now.
Yeah, that's right, David. We are outside Red Cross headquarters in North Portland, and I can tell you that 7 volunteers from Oregon are either in Florida or on their way. An additional 20 volunteers from Oregon and Southwest Washington are on standby and ready to respond if necessary. And tell you what, don't be too surprised if they do have to respond. The early images of Hurricane Ian slamming the west coast of Florida are incredible. Closely monitoring the situation is the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office. That's because the agency is sending 13 people from its incident management teams to Florida. It's too early to say where in the Sunshine State the Oregon teams will end up, but we're told they'll handle everything from public information support to logistics and operations planning.
When we have impacts like this, we have had folks all over the nation come to help us. And so, it's only natural that, we're helpers, right? We're firefighters. And so we want to go and help. And so anytime that call comes in, we're fortunate we have folks that are trained and able to answer the call and that they're willing to go.
All right, the folks from the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office will be in Florida for at least 14 days. As for the volunteers from the Red Cross, the length of their deployment is unclear at this point. David?
Yeah, and understandably, since the storm is hitting right now. Thank you, Mike. If you would like to donate to the Red Cross to help with Hurricane Ian relief efforts, you know what to do here. Just scan the code on the screen. It'll direct you to a link. We also have this up for you on KGW.com. Stay with us for continuing coverage on air, online, on our app, as we continue to track Ian and talk about the recovery across the Sunshine State. Let's get to other headlines this evening, with Oregon set to become the first state in the nation to try a new approach to Medicaid. Now, this includes $1 billion in federal funds to address issues like hunger and homelessness. Brian Clerkley is here. Brian, over a third of Oregonians are covered by the Oregon Health Plan, so this could potentially impact a lot of people.
Yes, David, the idea is to keep people healthier by addressing more of their basic needs. To achieve that, the state will use Medicaid to fund things like rental assistance, meal programs, and food boxes. Expanded health coverage will also be extended to children under 6 years old.
A Central City concern, we are very excited about the announcement for the health-related social needs package of services being approved for our state Medicaid program.
In a virtual press conference this morning, the Oregon Health Authority, along with several other entities, announced the new approach to Medicaid that would provide $1.1 billion in federal funds to address inadequate food, housing, and other root causes that lead to poor health.
Under this agreement, Oregon will be the first state approved to use federal Medicaid dollars to fund medically necessary health-related services, including housing costs, such as rental assistance.
Health coverage will be extended for children.
Under this waiver, we will provide continuous Oregon Health Plan coverage to all eligible children under 6 years of age. That means fewer disruptions in health coverage and health care during a child's formative early years.
The system will also provide health coverage for young people with special needs up to age 26. Oregon will also become the first state approved to use Medicaid dollars to help people dealing with the impacts of extreme heat and wildfires. Medicaid can directly cover air conditioners, air filters, and shelter for medically vulnerable people on the Oregon Health Care Plan.
People need to find safety first, and then health, and then stability.
Sarah Sullivan is the executive director of the Gorge Grown Food Network. The organization supports thousands of families by providing fresh fruits and vegetables. She says this new program will provide a lot more access to people.
The number of people we have been able to serve is limited by a lack of funding and complicated mechanisms for enrolling patients into programs. That is why this medical waiver to bolster access to nutritious food and cooking education is so practical.
Patrick Allen with OHA says a lot of these measures will not go into place until 2024 because there's still a public health emergency related to the pandemic. That means people are in continued enrollment. So when the COVID state of emergency ends, a lot of these measures will go into place. David.
Thank you, Bryant.
Well, as a seasoned politician like Betsy Johnson should know, there is one endorsement process for governor.
That sounded pretty prickly. We're hearing pushback this evening from the political arm of Planned Parenthood over some comments made by Betsy Johnson at last night's governor's debate in Bend. They had to do with whether the unaffiliated Johnson was invited to compete for Planned Parenthood's endorsement. Now, she says she wasn't. They say she was. Tim Gordon joins us. Tim, last night's debate covered a lot of ground, though the reaction to this one really caught our attention.
David, it really did, because the Planned Parenthood's Political Action Committee came out strong right after the debate, calling out Johnson on this. They also say her record is not perfect on the reproductive rights issue.
Tonight, they'll debate questions.
The debate on Monday night, put on by Bend NBC affiliate KTVZ. The three candidates, Republican Christine Drazen, Democrat Tina Kotek, and the former Democrat running unaffiliated Betsy Johnson. There were questions on a variety of important issues, from gun control to public schools performance. They also took on homelessness, and each had plenty to say. Here's just a part of that discussion.
We need to continue to expand access to mental health supports and behavioral health supports, and certainly a substantial effort has been made to add new shelter space recently. But with that, you have to hold people to account.
There is a mental health crisis. We need to deploy people that are trained in helping folks deal with mental health crisis. And at some point, we're going to have to recognize that mentally ill and drug addicted people do not make good personal choices for themselves.
I believe cities should have health and safety reasons for restricting where people can be living outside. And you know what? No one should be living outside in Oregon. It's inhumane, and we have to do more.
And when it came to abortion, candidate Drazen said she is anti-abortion and wants change, but would follow state law even if she doesn't like it.
I believe that Oregon, in fact, is among the most extreme in the nation for our current abortion laws.
Kotek countered as the candidate endorsed by Planned Parenthood's political advocacy arm.
I don't believe our laws are extreme here, like Representative Drazen says. I think they're in line with where Oregon values are.
As for Johnson, she said she is unapologetically pro-choice, but did not get to compete for the Planned Parenthood endorsement.
I wasn't allowed to present credentials for Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood now is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democrat Party. We weren't asked to fill out a form or to present credentials.
To that, Planned Parenthood cried foul.
Betsy Johnson essentially lied to voters last night. She was invited to participate in Planned Parenthood PAC of Oregon's endorsement process 9 months ago, and she ignored that invitation.
9 months ago was during the primary race, Johnson says, before she was a candidate. Her campaign writing today, they are misrepresenting their process, which was neither rigorous nor comprehensive and did not invite all candidates who champion reproductive rights. Now, for its part, Planned Parenthood says even if Johnson had applied, it sees several reasons to not endorse her, including some votes against abortion rights-related issues and the backing from someone they call an anti-abortion extremist. David?
It sounds like they are having a debate outside of the debate. Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tim. You know, we're going to be hearing much more from all three candidates when KGW and the Oregonian host our debate in the race for governor. That is 3 weeks from today on Wednesday, October 19th. By the way, in local election news, Portland City Council candidate Renee Gonzalez is now pushing back against a $77,000 fine. It is from Portland's small donor elections program over office space the Gonzalez campaign rented downtown for $250 a month. The city says the space actually has a market value of $6,900 a month and calls the discount an illegal in-kind contribution. Now, the Gonzalez campaign says this doesn't go against city campaign finance rules, and they argue the fine should be waived. That building owned by Jordan Schnitzer, who says he offered to rent the space to Gonzalez because nobody else was interested. Now, Gonzalez is looking to unseat incumbent Joanne Hardesty, and I'll be moderating a debate between the two with KGW hosting in partnership with the City Club of Portland. You can watch that live Friday at noon on KGW.com or on our mobile app, and we'll have highlights Friday afternoon right here as well as on a special edition of Straight Talk. Looking forward to that.